If everybody could please find their seats, we're going to go ahead and start. I'm Paul Buchanan, Chairman of the Eastern Alliance. On behalf of the Eastern Alliance, we welcome everybody here today. On behalf of the board and staff of the North Carolina Eastern Alliance, welcome to the 2015 State of the Region, where we will report on activities and announcements of the 2014 and talk about what is in store for 2015. First, let me say thanks to the board and staff for merging the transition from public entity to the private sector. Now for profit organizations supported by both public and private investors. I would like for the board members of the Eastern Alliance to please stand. I would like for the staff of the Eastern Alliance to please stand. I know some are in the hallway, but there's some here. I have to say it has been a great team effort. At one of our board meetings immediately after our merger with the Northeast Alliance, it was very evident we had great cooperation and working together. The board meeting was dynamic, filled with energy, as was welcomed 3 new board members from the northeastern counties. This is a group united behind the concept of recognition that together we can achieve much greater success than we might individually. As our board meeting earlier this morning, we elected 2 individuals to the Alliance Board. Millie Chalk, District Manager for Government and Community Affairs with Duke Energy. And I did see Millie. Would you stand? Thank you for coming to our board. Terry Frank, President and CEO of Frank Door Company. Terry was one of our clients over a decade ago when we made the smart decision to move to Eastern North Carolina. And I don't think he's here, but we put him on the board this morning also. Thanks to our investors for making this possible. We could not have done this without you. Biden Health, East Carolina University, Duke Energy, Dominion Power, PNC Bank, ECS Carolinas, Transportation Impact, and several others have directly invested with us, like Electric Cities and North Carolina Electric Corporations, and many others have provided significant support to special programs and activities. I want to recognize those elected officials and their representatives in the audience today. Do we have any elected officials? I know I'm a county commissioner out of Onslow. I know we have some other commissioners. If you would please stand, or any elected official. Thanks to all of you that have decided to join us today to celebrate moving Eastern North Carolina forward. Before I introduce John, one of the things I want to say, Calvin's here. I know Denny didn't come over with us, but there's 3 of us that have been on board this for the last 12 years. And we started out with, I think, what Jim Cawley was telling, he's our attorney with the Eastern Alliance. There was 40-some members of the Eastern region, then it went to 17 members. And now today it's gone for nonprofit, and it's an organization that we brought people together. So there's only 3 of us from the original board. They're all brand new members, and we're very proud to have them on board. And most of them are sitting at the table today, and most of them were in our meeting this morning. Without further ado, and now I would like to introduce the President and CEO, John Chaffee, to give us an overview of the state of the region. John.
Thanks very much, Paul. Delighted to see so many faces here today. Thank you very much. For those who have supported us over the last 18 months, you know it's been a little bit of a bumpy journey on occasion, but we're here today, and you are as well, and we're thrilled that you gave us a little bit of your time today to hear about what's taking place in Eastern North Carolina. Again, I want to reiterate for Paul, one is really thank you to the members of our board. The beauty of it is we've got a group of people that really do believe in regionalism, and a regional approach is the way to go in terms of being able to build a stronger Eastern North Carolina. So first, a thanks to the members of our board. But secondly, and no slight to our board members, but maybe more importantly, is a thanks to our staff. Because it has been one heck of a journey. And the nice thing is everybody stayed with us, stayed on board, knew it was going to be a little bit challenging. I think they're really excited about the fact that today has arrived because tomorrow is going to be a much easier day. We might actually let them take a little bit of time off. There's some of those staff members that have been working I would guess probably 16 hours a day. Now, we joked about it at the beginning, is you can work a half a day, just pick which 12 hours you want to work. Because that's what's in store for us over the next year and a half. But the nice thing is now we're here, and we're all still being seen, and we're vertical. And that's always a great feeling. So thank you all for being here. Got to advance that slide for Paul, but Paul Buchanan, our chair, as we mentioned, he's been with us for quite some period of time, so he's seen in terms of what's taken place over the years, and we're thrilled that he was willing to step up and help us navigate the waters over the course of the last year or so. As you know, the NC East Alliance has existed since January 1 of 2014 as the new entity, stood up to be able to manage that transition, going from a public entity to a private not-for-profit. And we've made it with a lot of your help in terms of being able to get there. So thank you all for what you've done for us. Our mission, it's been redefined a little bit, pretty much the same, so we're not a grant-making organization any longer. I'll let you read it. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but basically what we're all about is job creation and empowering people in Eastern North Carolina to take advantage of the jobs that are available today, and our expectation will be available tomorrow. Part of our targets is see as we go through and chat a little bit about it. We're still about a capacity building. We're just more narrowly focused now than what we were in the past, particularly in terms of workforce development and STEM education. But the other element is that's the groundwork, laying the groundwork to be more successful in our effort to be able to facilitate the creation of jobs throughout Eastern North Carolina. We truly mean throughout Eastern North Carolina. We haven't forgotten about the disparity, the tremendous diversity that we have in terms of the counties we represent, which now number 26. But we think there is opportunity for every single county and community in our region. It's just a matter of finding the right recipe that works for that individual community, and we're committed to that, whether that involves in terms of how do we go about promoting and working with people to promote tourism, or in terms of attracting new companies, or helping to create new companies. So, as I mentioned, the transition is over and we're moving forward, and we're delighted to have you as part of it. Our region is doing relatively well, much to the surprise of some in terms of, yes, our population is growing and growing at a pretty healthy clip. Not as fast as North Carolina overall. There's some pretty sizable urban areas that attract a huge number of people every day. But we are growing faster than the U.S. as a whole, and that resonates well when we're talking with companies outside our region. So we've got a growing, and we also have a pretty good population pyramid. If you look at it in terms of the number of people we have that are of a young age, as we're building that population, which means we've got the population to support economic growth over the course of the next several years. We're still a little bit behind, but we are growing, and we're growing at a more rapid rate in terms of our median household income, as well as in terms of, we had been in our per capita income. We took a little bit of a dip in terms of 2013. We think we'll come back and see that rebound as we go into 2014 once those numbers come out. Poverty index, as we probably started a little bit higher. So explaining this is that our rate of growth in the number of people in poverty has slowed relative to the state and the nation as a whole. And that's a good thing. We started out a little bit higher level, so we still got a good ways to go, but we're making progress on that. Tourism. Read the other day in terms of we used to actually have a little bit of a growth curve, if you know, going back several years, a little bit better than the state. We didn't take as big a dip, and we started coming back more rapidly than the state as a whole, but we drifted a little bit. It's rather disturbing. I saw the other day was a stat in terms of the number of people passing between Ocracoke and Cape Hatteras, down 29%. So we got to figure out a way to be able to boost that again, working with our coastal counties, is how do we basically build off of that to draw more people to come and visit. And part of what we're promoting too is once they've come and they've seen and they've experienced it, it's a really great place to invest, and we wish they'd come for a lifetime, not just a day or a week. New business starts. We're back on the incline again. It's a little bit surprising. Typically, business starts accelerate during a recession. We actually had a great series there right before the recession, and then took a little bit of a hit, but at least we're turning back up again. I'd like to think part of that is an organization we helped launch several years ago in partnership with the North Carolina Small Business and Technology Development Center, with a little bit of help from the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. And that's a group called Inception Micro Angel Fund East. So they've been around for a few years. We thought that it was an important element to have in Eastern North Carolina to help us launch new companies or help small companies grow into bigger companies. Our prior organization put in $277,500. Actually, we committed to up to $300, saying we'll put in $1 for every $2 of private money that comes in to IMAF East, because we believe that was an important element of how do you go about growing a regional economy. The nice thing is they've invested in 15 companies, and a little bit over $1.5 million. Still have a pretty sizable amount of money in the bank to continue to invest. So my message out to you is, if you know of somebody that wants to start a business, particularly if it's a technology-driven business, there's help for you out there. And you just need to get in touch with us or Don Mills, who's in this room, I think. Don, where are you? There he is, over there in the corner. So come see us, call Don Mills. We'll get you connected. Because not only is there IMAF East that exists today, there's also IMAF Coastal Plain that's based in Rocky Mount. There's a similar group down in Wilmington. Hopefully we'll see another one that'll crop up to be able to service Eastern North Carolina. There's also the Eastern Angel Investment Network, I think is what it's called, which is a different pot of money. Those individuals don't move as a group, they move individually. But they're out there and they've invested in a number of companies that have been very successful in Eastern North Carolina. So that's part of it. Working in concert with the Entrepreneurial Initiative at ECU, we've staged now the second Entrepreneurial Summit, supported by SBTDC and some others. We did a business plan competition this year for the first time and added to it. It's very successful, had some really interesting projects, but a number of people, it wasn't just folks from Greenville, it was a number of individuals from around the region that came and participated and won and received funding to help them move their business forward. We want to do that again in terms of focusing really on that business plan competition. I know that IMAF Coastal Plain actually sponsors one, I think, along with a group called Springboard in Rocky Mount. And so there's a nice little bit of activity to be able to create a platform to help move small businesses and create new businesses. We had about 75 attendees at the one this past year. It was good. Got support from Daniels & Daniels attorneys that helped with patents law, and McGladrey accounting firm for that. So you still need to think about the broad scope of helping to create young, new companies, some of which are gazelles. They grow relatively rapidly, create jobs at a full range of jobs, very high end as well as what you might say entry-level types of positions, and they're all important to us. Wanted to point out to you in terms of this graph, if you look, the preponderance of employment in our region is made up of companies that employ between 10 and 99 people, at least if they're in the private sector. It doesn't include the public sector, folks. There's been a little bit of a dip in those in terms of employ more than 500. Part of that was the toll taken from the recession in terms of where larger companies lost jobs and basically went under that 500 mark, dropped back. So for them to be out there, the particular thing is they've survived. Hopefully we'll see that grow. So we'll see even that category go back up again like the other categories have been growing over the years. Wanted to point out for you a little bit in terms of, well, people don't think about us as being a manufacturing region as compared with other areas of North Carolina, but we've had a pretty sizable amount of manufacturing. We've lost a pretty considerable amount of manufacturing. If you look at 96 to 2001, give you a benchmark, 1993 is when NAFTA was signed. We grew our manufacturing base after the signing of NAFTA. In 2001 is when China was allowed into the WTO, World Trade Organization. That, along with a little bit of a rocky path, kind of created havoc in North Carolina. So if you think about it, there are instances in terms of, at least at the federal level, there is a matter of picking winners and losers. And a lot of our manufacturing base were among the losers. Textile, furniture, apparel. Tobacco was a little bit of a different story, but it still hit us pretty hard as well. We lost jobs between 2001 and 2006. Some instances, some of our counties lost jobs again between 2006 and 2011. Nice thing is we began to see that turnaround coming in 2011, thereabouts, and growing in terms of up to 2014. So we're on the right track in terms of it. I'll mention this too. This is relative change. So it's not absolute change. If you look at a county like Catawba County, Hickory, that one county lost 40,000 manufacturing jobs. We have counties that, collectively, if you took a handful of them, wouldn't amount to that many jobs. But this is relative change, so it still hit us as well. But this is what's going on in terms of, if you break that down and look in terms of what industry groups were really the most affected. It's not too surprising. Textiles, textile mill products, wood in it. You think about what happened to the paper industry. Most of us don't really push as much paper as we used to. So it's definitely had an impact in terms of the wood and the paper industry. But a number of others there. But there were some signs in terms of growth. If you look in terms of food manufacturing, food and beverage industry, chemical manufacturing, which includes pharmaceuticals, and machinery. We do all of those things, and we do all those things relatively well. So if you take a look at our industry snapshot in terms of what happened of our overall regional economy, employment by industry, this is what it looked like in the third quarter of 2004, a little over 10 years ago. Pretty well balanced, diverse, only about 13.8% in manufacturing at the time. One time it had been considerably higher than that. Healthcare services, 14.5% roughly. And take a look at the change that's taken place. Not dramatic, but still indicative in terms of what's taken place. Manufacturing shrunk, but the other part is part of the other sectors actually grew, like the healthcare industry. Posed some challenges for us, but are keeping track of it. We talked a little bit about in terms of last year that we have a cluster-based approach to economic development. One of the things that we've been doing, one of the things that our staff has been charged with and using our interns is how do we go ahead and now translate that into northeastern North Carolina as a result of our merger. So we've madly been working in terms of mapping out our clusters across now our full 26 counties and looking at those that are important to us. Logistics certainly is. So undergirds a lot in terms of the manufacturing sector and beyond, wholesale trade. So logistics is important to us. We have a pretty sizable presence there. Value-added ag, no surprise there. It's pretty well distributed, really pretty broadly across our region. And this excludes any company that employs less than 20 people. So you can imagine what this map would look like if we included all the small companies that are involved in food and beverage and value-added ag. That would be covered up. Part of the reason we had to exclude it. But it's certainly a very important sector to us. Still employs over 20,000 people. Marine trades, very largely in terms of a coastal activity, but there are some outliers in there. Proud of the fact that Grady White Boats makes their boats here in Greenville, North Carolina. But we got a lot of great boat manufacturers across the region, and then part of their supply chain. We're not done with this cluster yet because we haven't mapped out really the full supply chain that's there to be able to support that industry. Motor vehicle assembly. We're going to talk a little bit about that industry as we go forward. Not the full report that we had hoped to have for you today, but nonetheless, a very important sector for us. We're still in the process of mapping that out. And this component of it, machining, is a really an integral part of motor vehicle assembly and parts manufacturing because it basically undergirds all of those companies. If they're doing assembly, they're going out looking in terms of machine shops to be able to provide and make parts for them. Machining actually undergirds a lot of different industry sectors. So it's really incredibly important. Surprises some that we have this amount of this magnitude of machining, but it also includes metalworking industry in eastern North Carolina. Aerospace, still an interconnectivity between those actual three different groups, metalworking, machining, the motor vehicle assembly and parts manufacturing cluster. A lot of crossover there, at least potential for crossover, in moving companies that are already in the business of supporting the motor vehicle assembly and parts manufacturing to moving into the supply chain of the aerospace industry. And that's an industry that's certainly growing in eastern North Carolina, very clearly growing in the southeast U.S. So particularly important for us. And can't forget life science. pretty heavily clustered in the western part of our region, but the supply chain stretches out and reaches out pretty broadly, even all the way to the coast, particularly in terms of when you look at the research capabilities that we have there. And how do we go about tapping into that? Several years ago, if you remember, we helped create the Marine Biotechnology Center Innovation. The nice thing is those two of those people are in the audience with us again today. We are embarking on a new collaboration, and hopefully you'll hear a little bit more about that as to how do we go about growing this one sector and what impact it's going to have on Eastern North Carolina. We think there's potentially huge opportunities for us there. Working collaboratively, we'll be able to cash in on that. Industrial announcements. It's been a good period of time. I'll note one thing. We haven't had a lot of new companies announced in Eastern North Carolina. We think that'll change as we move forward, but we've had a sizable amount of existing industries announce expansions. And at a pretty healthy rate in that. You can see there's certain sectors that are really outperforming the others, but it is nice to see we're achieving, again, diversity in terms of looking at a number of different sectors grow in Eastern North Carolina. If you look in terms of where those announcements have been made, pretty well distributed across the region, but we can do better. Again, you've got to look in terms of by size and by scale. There's certain types of activities, or at least by scale of activities, large manufacturing plants that may not be able to go into some of our rural counties, but there's still opportunities, particularly in terms of supply chain. Big part of what we do, we talked about, is marketing. Getting out on the road, getting face-to-face with people that lead companies or have an influence in terms of company decisions. By that, we mean consultants. So we've been doing that. We've taken about, even despite the fact of our engagement and all the transition activities that we've been involved, we've still been committed to getting out and getting on the road. Some of our partners have really helped us with that. Certainly we've teamed up with the folks at Duke Energy, Electricities in particular, and others as we go forward to be able to do that and do that more effectively and efficiently. Our expectation is we'll do that with the EDP of North Carolina as Chris kind of rights the boat and moves us forward on that. So we're excited about where we are and where we're going. Those 14 trips have resulted in about 112 what we consider leads generated. Number of contacts with companies was somewhere up around 260. Those connections translate into about 112 leads. And a lead is something where somebody thinks they want to do something, but they can't really define it very well. When they can define it and attach numbers to it, and they're committed and they want to look at Eastern North Carolina, then we consider that to be a project. So that conversion is about 50%, and that's actually a pretty good ratio. Still a year into projects, we lose some, we win some. So we got about 39 active projects as we move into our new year doing that. Part of that other activity we talked about, and we're committed to keep moving on that. We've got a pretty healthy agenda as we move forward. The nice thing is now with our merger, we have Van Rogerson and Hannah on board with us to be able to help. So Van just got back from a trip to Chicago, had a couple of really great meetings, and we have an expectation we'll see client visits as a result of that trip before the end of this fiscal year, which means by June 30th. It's important for us to get the message out about Eastern North Carolina, about the diversity, about the innovative character of the people that live here, about the commitment in terms of making things happen and building better communities. And that's a large part of what we're doing on a collective and on a regional scale. So we had 24 news releases that went out. Some were simply just reporting on things like the fact we had this big sustainability and manufacturing event over in Wilson recently, to acknowledge the major accomplishment of Bridgestone Firestone Tire Company there. One of the first was picked up by 280 some odd outlets, I think, that one alone, which eclipsed the news release we put out about the growth of the value-added manufacturing, value-added ag capabilities in Eastern North Carolina. That's part of what we want to do, is we want to create a different message about what is Eastern North Carolina and what is it we have to offer. So we're going to keep that up. Message I'll put out to all of you is you may be the source of the next topic that we want to write about. So if you have something that's neat going on in one of your communities, we want to hear about it. Even if it's something like whirligigs or something that's unique about your community that is something that's resulted from a community action, we want to know about it. We may hold it for a period of time, may not be the right timing. We may need to find what do we put together with that to really make a story that'll catch attention. But we'll eventually write about it. If you look at our projects by cluster, pretty good diversity around there as well. Still in life science, advanced manufacturing, motor vehicles, value-added ag, aerospace and defense sector. We're still seeing client activity coming from that. Part of that is, as I mentioned before, in terms of like Van going to Chicago recently. Direct contact with companies. We want to get in front of a client, in front of a company leader, before they take the first step in the state of North Carolina. We want to tell them the story about what does Eastern North Carolina have to offer. So we're doing that in terms of trade shows. We're doing that in terms of contracting, making connections, identifying companies that have the potential to expand, and then going to their office and setting up meetings with them, and then getting them to come back like Van recently did and say they'll be here for a visit. Consultants we mentioned, still important for us to take out and connect with those folks. We recently had a number of them in. 5 we mentioned came in and spent some time in Eastern North Carolina to basically get acquainted with us, our local developers, our allies, and our communities. Went really very well. So we'll continue to engage them. A little bit of a challenge there. As Chris knows, our local developers know, incentives, whether you like them or not, is an important part of the process. So we're an advocate for them in a very methodical and a very responsible way. The state of North Carolina has been about that process for a number of years, is making sure that companies meet their targets, meets their benchmarks before they benefit from the incentive package that's been committed to that company. So there's no upfront payment that goes out. It's always a payment as they make and they hit their numbers by investment and in terms of the number of jobs to be created. Sometimes those companies miss the target. I want to mention something in particular. Mike, you can help us with this. There's reporting that's gone out talking about the state of North Carolina has committed X number of dollars for the creation of X number of jobs and X amount of dollars to be invested by a company. And they talk about, well, a lot of those jobs haven't been created. So factor this in. If you think about a company that comes in, makes an announcement, gets a commitment from the state, takes them 18 months to build their new facility, how many jobs are they going to create, permanent jobs are they going to create during the construction period of over 18 months? Not many. That job creation usually lags behind the announcement that's made. Sometimes it comes pretty quickly. Oftentimes it may be 18 months, and then it may take several years. Just make sure you understand is that incentive package is not paid out until the company hits those targets. So they may not be getting money for at least 3 years and maybe beyond. It's an important part, and that's being deliberated right now in our Senate and our House, and advocated by the governor to say, give us some ammunition to be able to work. Think if you've got a local economic developer at your table, ask them what they think about it and what it's doing for them. Economic development trends. What is that in terms of, this is a little bit about what we heard from our site location consultants that came in. Some of it's our experience, what we're seeing. Still about 75 to 80% of all projects that come to our desk or go to the state are looking for available buildings. Part of the message we heard from those consultants was also is if we can't find a building that suits our client, we're not going to start the process all over again. We're going to go back to those communities that have already been considered, we've already visited, and we have a sense we've already done a large part of our due diligence. We're simply going to go back to those communities and look at them again. That's a challenge. So if you don't have a good quality available building, you're going to get a look at about 1 out of every 7 clients, maybe. That's not very good odds. There are certain circumstances where there are specific projects and they've got to build a new facility because it's so unique. So it happens. The interesting thing I picked up is a certified site is not a be-all, end-all. I had one client, one consultant make the comment that blew me away is that we have very few clients that we've actually end up placing on a certified site. That was surprising. But they said you better have a site that's ready and make sure you've got policies in place in your community that if there needs to be a sewer line extended, you can document and demonstrate that that's not going to be a question mark. You've got it and it'll happen. You make the commitment and you can show proof that you've done that before to be able to satisfy the need of a client. Incentives are important, I mentioned, but they're not the largest incentive package is not necessarily going to win the deal. It's a matter of when you're following down to 3 different communities, then it may actually be the tipping point that moves it in favor of one community over another. The other thing, of course, was music to our ears. As a regional economic development agency, he said, if you're a small community, if you're not a really big metropolitan area, is that we'd love to have you stop by, but we're not going to give you time. Is we need to see in terms of a critical mass of capability. So thinking about, we go to them and talk about, we essentially are servicing 26 counties in eastern North Carolina that'll open the door. And the nice thing is we know these guys will open the door for us. Mentioned in terms of inventory, important to be able to have that. We have a number of industrial or corporate parks scattered across the region. Part of what we're doing is populating this. So when you go to our website and you pass over one of these icons, that information on that park will pop up, give you a description of it, how many acres, how many individual sites, what kind of utility infrastructure does it have, what's its address. That's part of what we can do in terms of being able to provide an opportunity for our individual counties and communities to have a face out to the outside world. Important also in terms of thinking about overall infrastructure. Energy is certainly a part of it. Been some pretty substantial things that have taken place recently that have a dramatic effect on eastern North Carolina. Relating to energy is certainly in the buyout proposition by Duke Energy Progress for our electricity communities. Certainly we think it's going to brighten our world. Atlantic Coast Pipeline coming roughly down the Interstate Highway Corridor 95. A new source of gas in eastern North Carolina. Lower cost, better reliability, important for us. Solar energy, one of those things we're advocating, say it's still important. If you think about a very rural county that may not be able to attract a major industry, but they can get a $100 million solar plant, even if it is discounted, it's still a $20 million tax base. That's huge for some of our very, very rural counties. So it's still important to us. Infrastructure, I won't go through these individuals, but certainly in terms of, we identified earlier, there's certain key highway corridors that are critical for the advancement of eastern North Carolina. US 70, US 17 is another one. US 64, US 17 corridor, talking about that as an interstate from Raleigh to Norfolk. Talked about several years ago, didn't get much traction. We're hoping to change that in terms of today and the current day, in terms of being able to move that forward. We think we're in much better shape. I want to mention this one in particular, though, the GTP, Global Transport. Much maligned, challenged. But you think about it, it was an idea that was gestated over somewhere probably 25 years ago. Became a reality a little over 20 years ago in terms of at least an entity being created to do it. But it wasn't until this year, 2015, that it actually has all the elements that were talked about 25 years ago that would make the GTP a multimodal industrial facility based on an airport. And that has now happened in 2015. So we've been talking about it a long time, but finally the investments have been made to make the GTP really what it was intended to be a long time ago. That's important for us as an element. Significant developments that have taken place. This is really more on the training and capacity building component. If you think about looking at specific clusters, having training facilities that are really geared to support those clusters is important for us. We're really very fortunate. Pitt County, East Carolina University, Pitt Community College, a number of others, North Carolina Biotechnology Center again, came together to be able to come up with this idea of facilitating the development of this as a North Carolina resource, but based in eastern North Carolina, the Biopharma Development and Manufacturing Center of Excellence. Another great tool for us to be able to go out and talk about what's taking place and our ability to support that particular industry in the East. But even other elements like the College of the Albemarle's facility that actually dedicated 2 years ago, located in Currituck County, a nice facility. If you think about the aerospace industry, what they call power plant and airframe certifications, really critical to supporting that industry. And that's become a reality in our region in our old region and our new region as well. The other element in terms of STEM, got to be undergirded by STEM. If you look in terms of the industrial segments, the manufacturing segments that were growing, even if you look in terms of the healthcare industry, all driven in terms of people that have a competency in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But as Steve Hill likes to talk about it, it's not just STEM in that old sense. It's strategies that engage minds. That's what we're about in terms of promoting STEMs, is how do we get young people engaged? So in Pitt County, it may be called STEAM, but it's still strategies that engage minds. Innovation, technical competency, working in teams, a whole number of different skill sets that you really need to have today to be effective. The other thing I wanted to cite, because Kathy Howard put an awful lot into this, a group called Aspire, which was all our community colleges, teamed up about 8 years ago, to basically launch our workforce development program. Then we did a pilot that was funded by the Rural Center. It's called Work Ready Communities. The whole notion of a pilot is you test it out, you figure out what worked well and what didn't, and then hopefully you scale it up. Well, that scaling took place last year with Work Ready Communities. The beauty of it is the very first one recognized in the state of North Carolina by the North Carolina Chamber, who now runs that program statewide, was Wayne County. And Wayne Works was the origin of the whole concept of creating our workforce development initiative and Work Ready Communities. So my hat's off to Wayne County. They're not the only one in the region that was certified, but they were the very first. So great job. Keep it up, folks. The other element, feeding the civilian labor force. We talk about college graduates and how important they are. But it's not just 4-year college graduates, it's 2-year college graduates as well. Getting people to understand the connection between the pathway and moving up through high school, maybe in terms of taking advantage of early college, at the junior high school, at the junior level in high school, and getting their 2-year associate's degree. And that's big. Something that we tout about the number of people moving into the labor force. And our intent is we want to capture more of those people and keep them in Eastern North Carolina. But there's another hidden resource out there that we intend to promote in league with East Carolina University, OEICD, and some others, is active duty military personnel that are transitioning out of the military. It's a tremendous resource. It's talked about. We're beginning to try and do something about it. How do we make that linkage? So we're working now with the transition officers. Really appreciate the Economic Development Office in Onslow County getting us connected to that person. Our mission is we want to get him connected to as many employers in Eastern North Carolina to realize there's enormous opportunity here. There are programs available. I don't think I have the map. I don't, unfortunate. But if that individual stays as a resident, resides within 45 miles of a military installation, they still get their medical benefits, which is huge. What they're more interested in is the salary component. They want to live within that 45-mile radius. The military will move them one time after they exit the military. So they may not live in Jacksonville any longer. They may move 45 miles inland, but then they can commute to another job that may be beyond that 45-mile distance. And you think about it, we've got facilities in Havelock, Goldsboro, Jacksonville, and all the naval installations across the border in Virginia. That 45-mile radius reaches into northeastern North Carolina. It's an enormous talent pool. Most of these people are college educated. If they're an officer, they've got a 4-year degree. If they're a higher level enlisted personnel, they probably have a 2-year degree. James is the person that you can go to and talk about how does my job classification match up with the MOS in the Marine Corps. And he can tell you, well, you need to look at these folks. And you think about the different personnels. James has actually mapped it out by our clusters and said, if you're looking for healthcare personnel, we've got all these people with these occupational classifications that would fit right in to your healthcare, your life science company. Other thing that we talked about, if you're in the pharmaceutical industry and you want somebody that could actually follow the recipe, can learn and understand GMP really quickly, These guys and girls can do it, and do it pretty good and going quickly. The other part of it is the military will pay for a portion of their education once they even leave the military. So if you want to take somebody and be able to ramp them up to fit into your organization, they've got a way to be able to do that and help you absorb that cost. So one thing I charge you in terms of private employers, public employees for that matter, is if you can figure out a way to hire somebody as a permanent employee, not offer them medical or health insurance benefits, but translate that into cash, you got a really winning combination. It's a matter of thinking out of the box. How can we go about doing this and tapping actually a higher number of college-educated people that are moving into the civilian labor force in Eastern North Carolina every year. Educational attainment, it's an important component. We need to keep moving up the scale. We're moving in the right direction, particularly in terms of, I think, among two-year college graduates. We still need to keep moving that component up, keeping more university graduates in Eastern North Carolina. We actually, last year, we had exceeded, the last time we had to measure, we exceeded the state average. We dropped back a little bit in terms of that relative position, but we think some of the things, tools we're putting in place are going to be able to put us in position to move back in that positive direction again. CRCs is one way to be able to do that in terms of meeting the needs of employers. Again, we still, after our merger, have a higher number of absolute people with a CRC and a higher percent of our working age population that possesses a CRC than any other region of the state of North Carolina. We're making progress in terms of the expansion of our STEM East initiative and our STEM centers. Great marriage in terms of between the employers and our educators. We have a number of our educators in the room today, and I salute you for what you're doing with diminishing resources. Hopefully with the positive budget outlook, we're going to see that turn around here before too much longer. But we're moving in the right direction. We're setting the right baseline in terms of what is it we think we need to do, and working in partnership with our employers, with our educators, regardless of what level, public school up to university level, and our local development organizations, whether they be a Chamber of Commerce or others, is spreading the word and spreading the message. So with that, I'm done for now. So what I would like to do is, that's the cue for Steve Hill, wherever he is in this room, to step up and come and join me on the platform and take over in terms of, part of the reason in terms of why y'all are here today, I think. Steve?
I will be very short. My goal is to diminish myself from the stage light and start increasing the stage opportunities for your regional educators and especially your students. Today we have a very special award. Basically it's coming in recognition of STEM East. STEM East is not an office or a person. STEM East is a series of network schools and districts that are working together to build a unified voice for Eastern North Carolina and to start bringing resources here and showing the world that we've got an A1 class education system here and that we can produce the workforce you need. For the private partners in this room, what I'm talking about is a grow your own, just-in-time model of a workforce. What John talked about earlier was basically if you signed a paper today, it's going to be a few years before those jobs are created. If you look at those years, it's normally 5, 6, and aerospace is in the room today, sometimes 9 years before you reach your peak hiring year. Count back. You need to be working in K-12 education. Listen to your HR associations. They're saying the same thing. This is a new national model. We've got to get engaged and start building up from the bottom. To show what that looks like and what the potential is, I'm going to begin getting off the stage and introduce some young ladies. If you guys would come up, please. This is what it can look like for you. This is the future of advanced manufacturing. I want to introduce Emily Thorne, Lauren Klein, and Hallie, I always mess that up, Hallie Rouse. And they're going to tell you what it means to be smart and start a system of HR a little earlier than you're used to.
In middle school, we participated in the STEM program in Mr. Casey's class, and we enjoyed it so much that in 7th grade, we joined TSA, which is Technology Student Association.
In 7th grade, we competed in the Inventions and Innovations competition, and we won first place in the state. So the following year, we competed again with our plaque attacker and won first in the state and fourth in the nation.
We enjoyed engineering so much in TSA in middle school, we decided to pursue our interest in high school through Project Lead the Way with Mr. Stephen Thorne. And we really enjoy it, and we're still going with it.
You guys aren't getting off stage that fast. What they neglected to tell you is, I know you caught a little bit of they got an award, but they actually developed a new type of toothbrush, and we'd love to work on a patent. We've been throwing that around, but they've won 2 or 3 awards since then. One of those was from the ECU funded event here in this very building. I believe it was here. Yeah. So this is your future, guys. This is not the old world of advanced manufacturing. This is your future, and this is what's coming out of the work that your districts are doing. We need to get public-private relationships started in education. And to show you how you should respect your peers and get involved with your peers, we have one here today. I'd like to ask Mike Hughes to please come up. I'm sorry. Mike is not just a professional person, he's also a personally involved person. Mike is the Vice President of Communications for Duke. I think that stands for itself. I don't have to talk about it. It's a Fortune 250 company. To be a Vice President in such an organization that is the largest power organization or company in the nation stands for itself. But he's also a local person. He's from this area. He was born at Camp Lejeune. His mother still lives here in Greenville. He's a graduate of East Carolina University, and I can't think of anybody better to represent this region than Mike today. So if you please help me welcome Mike to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. It's often said you don't want to be the last person between a group this size and lunch. It's another thing entirely when the cake's already on the table. So I will be brief. Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you, young ladies. It's great to hear firsthand the positive impact that STEM East is having on our students throughout the region. As Steve said, I am an Eastern North Carolina boy, born at Camp Lejeune, which we called Lejeune, of course, in those days. My father was also stationed at Cherry Point, lived at Camp Lejeune again. I went to East Carolina. After graduation, I worked in Beaufort County for 5 years. I have a great appreciation for all that Eastern North Carolina is and all that it can be. I also come from a family of teachers and healthcare professionals, so while I was a lowly English and journalism major, I have a great appreciation for the value of a STEM education and what it means to our region and to our state. I'm particularly excited to join you today because everyone in this room shares a commitment and a responsibility to strengthening Eastern North Carolina's economy. Education is the cornerstone of our success. No question about that. It's well established. The success of our children, success of our grandchildren, success of our businesses and our communities, it all stems, pardon the pun, from a great education. Duke Energy Foundation is committed to education and specifically to programs that foster a growing interest in STEM. We're working to help our communities grow and produce skilled workers who bring new ideas and new innovations. Now more than ever, we need to ensure our students are equipped with knowledge and background in science, technology, engineering, and math. The students standing on stage with me are the future leaders of our state, of our communities. It's crucial for us to invest wisely in bolstering an environment in which they can succeed. So, I'm very happy on behalf of Duke Energy to announce and present a $500,000 investment in STEM East to expand their reach throughout Eastern North Carolina and help prepare students as they enter a rapidly growing and evolving workforce. Specifically, this grant will establish STEM centers in middle schools in 6 Eastern North Carolina counties: Carteret, Craven, Greene, Lenoir, Onslow, and Wilson. It will also support the startup of programs in 5 other counties: Beaufort, Duplin, Jones, Pitt, and Wayne. Through the NC East Alliance, the STEM East Initiative has become part of the regional workforce development strategy, as well as an innovative model for education institutions at all levels. STEM East is connecting employers and students and educators throughout the region, bringing STEM to more students in Eastern North Carolina. Students get experience with concepts such as alternative energy, 3D printing, automation and robotics, applied physics, flight technology, and many other growing career paths. We're very excited to be part of this effort, which makes our state and this region more attractive to companies looking to grow or expand or relocate. At Duke Energy, we know that our success is tied directly to the vitality of the communities that we serve. No two ways about it. It's the nature of our business. So investments in the community are truly investments in our own business. So our investment in STEM East in support of the great work that you're doing is a vital part of ensuring that our region, the region that we all love, is prepared for a very bright future. Thanks for all that you do for the work that STEM East does and the NC East Alliance and all that you're doing to address regional skills gaps, to address expanded economic opportunities, and to enhance workforce development. And most importantly, thank you for inspiring our students to be high achievers. And to the students here on stage and the other students here in the audience, I know the future holds great things for you. And as you grow up and become scientists and engineers or some other career that hadn't even been imagined yet, I hope that you will one day consider coming to work for Duke Energy here in Eastern North Carolina. We need you. Thank you very much.
If we can, hold on, Mike. If we can, I'd like to recognize all the district representatives in the room. We have some students here. Would you come on stage? This is for you. And the superintendents, would you accompany those students to the stage, please, because we can get a quick picture of this. Because this is the people that are doing this. This is not an office. This is not one person. These are the people that are doing this. These are the people that are working every day. And without their agreement to work together as a region, none of this would be possible. You guys know about this school picture stuff.
Lauren, what are you doing?
You get it? Who's the guy we pay a lot of money to do this at? There he is. We good? Thank you, guys.
Wasn't that a great looking group of people? That really excites me. It's a pretty fantastic day. So to Duke Energy, Billy, John, Mike, all the others, we really do appreciate your interest, your support, and your belief in what we're doing is the right direction for Eastern North Carolina. So again, couldn't be more thrilled about where we are. Thank you. It's one other thing I want to share with you before we break for lunch, and I'd like to say we're just about exactly right on time, which is amazing. But the power of this goes beyond just the $500,000 that Duke is investing in Eastern North Carolina in terms of our counties. What it's actually done for us is allowed us to leverage those monies in terms of being able to also serve and support a number of the other activities that we undertake. Because as often is the case, what our investors allow us to do, so when we go out to federal agencies, other foundations, and we say, this is what's coming in to be able to support the economy of Eastern North Carolina, because it is a matter of supporting the economy of Eastern North Carolina. But what the Duke Energy commitment to us does, coming in to support us, and our relationship again to employers throughout the region, is it allows us to relaunch something that we announced about 1.5 years ago in partnership with the North Carolina Rural Center that essentially went away when the Rural Center didn't have the funds available for it. It was a partnership created between us, the NC Rural Center, NC State's Industrial Extension Service, and the North Carolina Small Business and Technology Development Center to basically pay attention and focus on two key clusters for us, the automotive sector, which we call the motor vehicle assembly and parts manufacturing cluster, and I'll explain that all to you later, but I'll let you call me, and the aerospace sector, both of which are now back and they're growing in Eastern North Carolina. But we had to come up with a match. And part of the three elements of that project were mapping out those clusters, getting to understand those clusters, engaging those companies, understanding the supply chain. Third thing was, what are you doing about workforce to be able to provide the talent that those companies need to be able to grow? So what the Duke grant translates into is not just that $500,000, but another $500,000 that'll come to the NC East Alliance to be able to run point on these two important clusters in Eastern North Carolina. So doubly thanking you guys for what you've done for us today. That is a really, really big deal. So thanks very much. Enjoy your lunch.